Hello, 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 and welcome to the third episode of Touchdown with Hansen and Brown. I'm joined today, I'm David Hansen, and I'm joined today by the red-hot redhead, Joe Brown.
I didn't know we were allowed to use racial slurs on here.
Well, we are, unfortunately. Joe, I will point out, I just had to point it out because the people who are listening cannot see a visual of us.
All right, for once in my life, people didn't associate me with redheads, and you had to make sure that happened.
Absolutely, Joe. It just wouldn't be a fair representation of this podcast if people didn't know that you are starting our beautiful, flaming-haired co-host.
Do you have any football to talk about, David?
That didn't make a lot of sense. I do, Joe. I have a lot of football to talk about. So many footballs. But before I do, a quick disclaimer. You are listening to PizzaFM, freeform, non-commercial college radio broadcasted in partnership with Unit 1 Living Learning Community at the University of Illinois. The views expressed by individuals on PizzaFM are not necessarily those of Unit 1 or PizzaFM as a whole. PizzaFM is made possible through the generous support of SORF, the 1867 Society, CRFB, and listeners like you. Thank you. Joe, any disclaimers from that side of the room?
You know, redheads can be all right sometimes.
Joe, I think you are always all right. I think you're better than all right.
Well, thank you, David.
Alrighty. Now that we're done discussing Joe's above averageness, we're going to go to the NFL, where there was an above average week of football played.
Man, quite a segue.
Thank you, Joe. This week, there was a record amount. There hasn't been this many people that hit 40 points, fantasy football points, since before you or I were born, Joe. I don't have the exact year on that. My bad. I'm not a professional. But what I can say is that this was a historic week for football and for fantasy football. This week we had 5 players hit over 40 points, like I said. The first one of those is Christian McCaffrey, running back for the Carolina Panthers, an overall amazing player. There was Aaron Jones, running back. Yeah, free
Aaron Jones carried my fantasy team this week, and it was amazing.
He is amazing. He is amazing, Joe, and he plays for the amazing Green Bay Packers, who had
who he plays for?
The amazing Green Bay Packers, who had a solid win over the Dallas Cowboys this week, and will continue to roll over the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football.
Now, I know that cheese isn't necessarily weak to lions, because I'm guessing lions are lactose intolerant. What if there was an NFL team called the Cheese Graters?
We'd be in real trouble, I'll tell you that. Us cheeseheads. Luckily, there is not, and there is no team that is greater than the cheese.
Gross. I'm going to start up a football team in Milwaukee called the Milwaukee Cheese Graters.
That'd be right next to Green Bay, you monster.
Exactly.
All right. So Aaron Jones, 49.2 fantasy points, the running back for the Green Bay Packers. The quarterback for the Texan Houstons. The Houston Oh, boy.
Keep it together.
Oh, boy. The Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson, 41.7 points. The wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints, 41.2 points. Now, those 4 players are already players that if you have them, you are putting them in your lineup every week, and you will continue to put them in your lineup every week unless they have a bye, because they are amazing, amazing players. There was one player, however, that came out as a bit of a surprise, and he actually had the most fantasy points this week. That is, of course, none other than Will Fuller, the 5th, who followed his namesake by getting 53 points, 53.7 fantasy football points, the highest of the week. Now, previous to this, Will Fuller had not done too much because the Texans' offense just hadn't been clicking all that well. He got 8.9 points week 1, 8 points the following week, 10.1, 5.3, and now in week 5, 53.7 points. So the question is, with Will Fuller, is he now someone you plug into your flex spot every week? Is he a matchup dependent, or is this just a fluke and you can't count on this too much more in the future? Joe, tell me your opinions of Will Fuller.
I would say at this point it's worth at least putting him in for the flex option next week, see what happens. I mean, this is an instance of the Texans finally getting their act together, and if this is a show of what's to come for their offense, then possibly Will Fuller's going to get more work funneled through him.
I completely agree. And with the way their defense was playing, with the Atlanta Falcons just tearing them apart, they're going to need more big plays to keep their point total up. If they can't get the defense to stop the other team from scoring points, they're just going to have to outscore them. And Will Fuller is the big play guy for that team. It was a little interesting to see DeAndre Hopkins not have as big of a game. We'll get to that later, but in a game where Deshaun Watson needed to throw the deep ball, Will Fuller is his man. And he is an alum from Ohio State. If you know anything about me, while I am a diehard Illini, I was also a big Ohio State fan back in my day. So I do like to see Will Fuller do very well. Alrighty. Enough about Will Fuller. Something else interesting about this week, an honorable mention for almost getting 40 points and making the 6 players to hit 40 points. Amari Cooper, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, had 39.6 points. Joe, he was 4 yards, or just 1 catch away from being in that 40 club.
You know what? Don't care, because he stopped Zeke from hitting 20.
Ooh. Joe is a Zeke owner, as longtime listeners of the show would know. Joe Brown drafted Zeke, and Zeke's been doing all right this year.
I was tricked into drafting Zeke. I drafted Zeke after it was revealed that he was holding out on his contract, and I didn't even know that was a thing.
But it worked out for you.
It ended up working out pretty well.
I'd say better than Melvin Gordon.
Probably could have taken McCaffrey. He didn't get taken until 9th pick.
Oh. 9th pick?
Yeah.
He's the best right now. He scored the most.
He is, but going into the season, he wasn't ranked that high.
Most leagues where if I had first, second, or third pick, no matter what, I would have taken McCaffrey. There was one league, so I'm in a league for money with my father, but I don't gamble, of course. I would never gamble or admit that I gamble over something that's recorded and anyone can listen to, including the police.
Well, sounds like you don't gamble, David. Continue.
I never gamble. But if I were to gamble and I were in a league with my dad, and we had the first overall pick, we ended up picking Saquon Barkley because we're like, don't get cute, pick Saquon. He'll be great. He won't get injured. Could have had Christian McCaffrey, but that's okay. We're still going to win our league. All right.
Touchdown with Hansen and Brown, ASMR radio.
Yeah, okay. So, touchdown. So Christian McCaffrey, I don't remember what we were talking about. So we're just going to move on to the next piece of news. But before we do that, one last word about Will Fuller. If you do have Will Fuller, you'd like to see some more big games out of him. However, be wary. He has a bye week, I believe 10. And then around week 11, his schedule actually gets pretty tough for him. He gets Indianapolis week 12, and Indianapolis' defense just shut down the Chiefs, the best offense in the league. Granted, they were missing Tyreek Hill, but that's besides the point. Week 13, they face the impeccable defense, that is the New England Patriots. They face Denver week 14, who has been gashed a little bit, but still a solid defense against the pass. Tennessee, a great defense against the pass in week 15. Week 16, Tampa Bay. You like Will Fuller in that game. And then week 17, if your league goes that late, Tennessee again. So you might want to sell high on him around week 9, 10, 11. But he is still a very viable play. Even past then, he could be considered a flex option. We'll see how Houston holds up in the tougher games in their schedule. Alrighty. Let's move on to injury news, and we're going to return to our favorite segment we have on this show, Barkley versus Brown. Brown.
Yeah, I think Barkley's winning. I think he is winning. He is back to actual physical activity. He's hobbling around. He's doing okay for himself. I'm going to be honest, 3 weeks after I sprained both of my ankles, I still needed a walker if I was going to walk without my boots on. and I was switching between a boot on one foot and an ankle brace. And when I say ankle brace, this thing was almost a cast. Is how thick these ankle braces were on the other foot. And I had to switch between those while walking around during the day. And I was still using crutches. The crutches were mostly so I could catch myself if I was falling over. But the point is, I was not particularly mobile 3 weeks after I injured myself. So the fact that Saquon Barkley is moving, he's getting physical, he is definitely expediting this recovery process. He is doing very well. I would not be surprised to see him back in 4 or 5 weeks after the injury. My guess would be 5 or 6 weeks. I don't think he's going to be back next week, just to play it safe, because what he's doing, the type of play that he has, he is going to be getting beaten up on the field, and they'll probably take an extra week to make sure he's good.
Yeah. I think so. Joe was out 4.5 weeks before he was able to participate again. So for those of you who did not listen to the first episode, we're trying to see if Saquon Barkley, professional athlete, can beat Joe Brown, professional.
Brown. There are comparisons. Unfortunately, there are differences. I sprained both of my ankles. Mine were also very severe. I don't know how severe Saquon Barkley's were. Saquon Barkley, is a professional athlete, someone who's obviously going to heal and recover a lot faster than me. But asterisks on that, what Saquon Barkley is trying to get himself in shape to do is far greater than anything that I ever attempted to do. So somewhere along the line, these timelines should be pretty comparable. He is trying to get himself to a level of play, a level of performance that most people would never attempt in their entire lives, and that is going to take some time.
What I'm hearing is that it's a equal bet. That's a fair bet. Right now we are on week 3. The Giants play tonight against the New England Patriots. He will be on the bus. He's going to go to the game, and he'll suit up if they tell him to. But the trainers, everything we've heard from this week from the trainers is that he is not ready for this week. Plus, if you are the New York Giants and you're playing the New England Patriots, do you really want to risk Saquon Barkley getting re-injured just so you can lose by lose less badly to the New England Patriots?
I would imagine Saquon Barkley is pretty terrifying to deal with even on one foot. Imagine pushing 3rd and 1 with Saquon Barkley, just hand it off and he pushes off of his good foot through the line. Those are some powerful legs he's got there.
Are some very powerful legs. However, up against a very powerful defense, the Giants dealing with a lot of more injuries that we'll talk about later. It's just, why would you bring Saquon back for this game? I wouldn't rush it. We'll see if Saquon's last week to beat Joe Brown, which I'm sure he cares a lot about, is next week, week 4 of his injury. We'll see if he is back before 4.5 weeks. Alrighty, talking about more injuries to top running backs, there was a little bit of a scare with Christian McCaffrey, as he did not practice or was limited on Wednesday. I have to check that to be sure. The reason he was limited is because Christian McCaffrey's back. There was one play where he rushed for a touchdown, and as he was leaping into the end zone, a player took out his legs and he landed on his back. It looked super cool. It was like a flip. It looked amazing. He held onto the ball. He got up right afterwards. It looked superhuman. Well, unfortunately to say, Christian McCaffrey is not invulnerable or invincible like we thought he is, or at least like I thought he is, but he is going to be okay. It was just kind of a routine. They just wanted to make sure his back was okay. He was a full participant at Thursday's practice. So Christian McCaffrey is going to be all right. Nothing to worry about there. However, if you are a Christian McCaffrey owner, maybe temper expectations. Last week, Christian McCaffrey carried the whole team on his back. He ran for 176 yards, scored 2 rushing touchdowns, caught a touchdown. He did everything for the team.
So you're saying he's injured his back from the weight of carrying the mess that Cam Newton created, basically.
Exactly. So my guess is the Panthers are like, oh, we don't want to break our young star. So especially against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have been good against the rush, but horrible against the pass on defense. I would suspect he is still. You're obviously starting him this week, but I expect he gets. It's maybe less points this week. I'm probably still in the 20 points. It's Christian McCaffrey, but just temper your expectations for him this week. All right, let's talk about some more players that had a little bit of injury scare but should be fine to play. First two we're going to talk about are both from the same team and are both playing tonight. They are Julian Edelman and Josh Gordon. Julian Edelman had a chest injury he's been dealing with for a little bit. Josh Gordon has a knee injury. Both of them will be available for tonight's game. Edelman's chest injury is kind of a lingering issue he's had for a couple of weeks. He plays through it. Sometimes if you watch the game, especially last week, you could see at one point where he just held his chest and looked a little bit in pain. But that guy is a monster, and he is playing through it. And there's a reason he is a Super Bowl MVP. So if you have Edelman or Gordon, feel fine to play them against a very vulnerable Giants defense. Obviously, Edelman, more of a wide receiver 2. Gordon would be more of a flex, maybe low-end wide receiver 3. But I would play both of them this week. Moving on, Julio Jones, another incredible wide receiver, had a bit of a hip scare. Didn't practice Wednesday. However, Julio Jones has a history of playing through injuries. He's rarely ever taken out with an injury. He is one tough cookie. And while they are monitoring him this week, and you should be too, my guess is that he plays this Sunday and plays very well. Some more players that should be fine. Patrick Mahomes had a little bit of an ankle scare. He is practiced fully.
He's no longer listed as questionable on ESPN.
No longer listed as questionable. He should be ready to play. Don't worry about Patrick Mahomes. If you have him, start him. But that's pretty obvious.
No one needed to tell you to start Patrick Mahomes.
My bad. All right. And Chris Godwin, someone who's having a breakout season, had a bit of a hip scare. However, this has also been kind of a lingering issue, and it didn't stop him from having a great week 5. So even though he was a limited participant in practice on Wednesday, I'm not worried about him. Roll out Chris Godwin if you have him against the Carolina Panthers. Here are some injuries to monitor. Todd Gurley finally starting to play well after a not great opening to the season. Came out this week. His coach came out, Sean McVay, and said he had a thigh contusion, and he's day-to-day. So, it doesn't sound super serious, but it could be. It's definitely something to look out for. If you have Todd Gurley, I would absolutely pick up Malcolm Brown as a handcuff. And I would just watch that. And honestly, even if he does play, I'm a little worried because when he has been injured in the past, or even at the start of the season when he wasn't 100%, they kind of had him on a pitch count and were giving some of the drives to Malcolm Brown. He was losing goal line work. It was just, if Todd Gurley has a week more similar to week 1 and 2 than week 5 this week, I wouldn't be surprised. So be wary of that. Amari Cooper has had this lingering ankle injury and just had a quad injury from last week. He's been limited to practice. Another person you should watch. Probably still likely to play, but obviously keep an eye on him. Christian Kirk, who was out last week with an ankle injury. They're still unsure if he could play, but his coach has said positive things about him. So he might be back. He'll still be the second wide receiver behind Larry Fitzgerald, but it's still a position that has volume. So if you have Christian Kirk, watch that. Another player that was out last week, Devontae Adams, Green Bay Packers wide receiver, had turf toe last week. This week, he will be playing Monday night football, so he would have had now 2.5 weeks-ish from the last game he played, which I believe was a Thursday night game, to heal and recover. So hopefully that's enough time on Monday. However, it is a Monday night game, so if he's injured, if he comes out as not playing, then you're in a tough spot. So make sure if you have Devontae Adams and you put him in your starting lineup, which you should if he has a possibility of playing, make sure you have a backup option, either from the Detroit Lions or from the Green Bay Packers. My recommendation is putting Devontae Adams in your flex spot instead of your wide receiver spot. That way you could replace him with either a running back or a wide receiver from either team. Alrighty, moving on. Another questionable is David Johnson, running back for the Arizona Cardinals, another first-round pick. David Johnson has had a back problem that has developed, and he was a non-participant about Wednesday. Keep close tabs on him. Maybe pick up Chase Edmonds, the backup running back, even if you aren't a David Johnson player, because there's fantasy value in being the starting running back for the Arizona Cardinals. And, hopefully he's not out. Hopefully more news comes in about that. Just monitor him if you are a David Johnson owner. Here are some players that are. One more player that is a questionable for this week is a player who's been out since week 1, and that is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, a phenomenal wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, had that shoulder injury. He could be back this week. They're still a little bit unsure. They're not going to put him back until he's ready to play and play big. But the Kansas City Chiefs could certainly use him right now after 2 weeks of kind of a stagnant offense and their first loss of the week last week coming to thanks to the Indianapolis Colts. Another reason they could use him is because another injury for the Chiefs is Sammy Watkins. Hamstring injury. Hamstring injuries are pretty tricky injuries. They're hard to, play through. And so he likely will not play this week. I do not expect Sammy Watkins to play. Another player I don't expect to play who's been out for a little while, Deshaun Jackson. Still having that abdomen problem, still rehabbing from it, likely not available this week. And then Brandon Cooks, who got a concussion, still needs to clear a five-step concussion protocol, probably will not be back this week for the LA Rams. So if you own any of those players, please look out. And finally, let's talk about the New York Giants, who seem to be injured everywhere. After losing Saquon Barkley 3 weeks ago, as we talked about, Sterling Shepard, their top wide receiver, out this week with a concussion. Their top tight end and one of their best receivers, Evan Ingram, is out with a knee injury, and Wayne Gallman, their backup running back, is out with a concussion as well. The Giants are hurting. They play this week against the New England Patriots. Oh no, that's real bad. If you have any Giants player this week, don't play them. I know Golden Tate, he's going to be now the number 1 option for the quarterback Daniel Jones. He's still against the New England Patriots. The only reason I would see him having fantasy value is in junk time. If they're down like 40-0, then the Patriots are going to be like, all right, we can stop playing hard now, and then maybe Golden Tate gets a couple of passes. But just don't play your wide receivers. It's likely that Darius Slayton will be out there since Shepard won't be out there. Maybe Jonathan Hillman as the running back. It doesn't matter. Don't play your Giants this week. Yeah, I mean, I like Daniel Jones as a quarterback, but after a rough week last week, it's not going to get better this week. Don't play your Giants. Another team I'm very nervous about because of injuries is the Steelers. They lost their backup running back, Jalen Samuels. He is not playing this week and will likely be out for a couple of weeks. Feel free, if you have him on your roster, you can probably drop him for now. I like James Conner this week. He should have a decent week. But they also lost their backup quarterback, and they're now on their 3rd-string quarterback. If you are a Juju Smith-Schuster owner, I am so sorry. He is not going to have a good week this week. And that's just how it is. It's, what can you do? They were already playing conservatively in the passing game with their backup quarterback. I can't imagine what it's going to be like with their 3rd string. Yeah. Juju is built on these big plays like we talked about last week, and they're just not going to happen this week. Yeah.
I mean, just the theme song from Friends comes to mind, when thinking about the Steelers, when it just hasn't been your game, your week, your month, or even your season.
It has not been a good season for the Steelers.
It's a shame. They're on the heels of a really great season last year.
Yeah. But after the whole Antonio Brown drama, they were like, we don't need him. We're gonna play just fine. And then Ben Roethlisberger.
We're the Pittsburgh Steelers. We have Ben Roethlisberger, and then Ben Roethlisberger was like, "Okay, I'm out."
Okay, bye. Yeah, unfortunately, the Steelers not looking too hot this week. When they set the schedule and put the Steelers on Sunday Night Football this week, I'm sure they did not expect them to be on their 3rd-string quarterback and missing, so many players. But here we are. Also the other wide receivers from the Steelers, I'm not liking too much this week. James Washington kind of becoming the 3rd guy up, so obviously I don't like him, especially with that backup quarterback or the 3rd-string quarterback, and then kind of their second best wide receiver that's been developing, Deontay Johnson. I think he's a good pickup. We'll see if the the third string throws to him. It's all up to who the third string makes a connection with. But they are against the Chargers this week, who had a great week defensively last week, even though they've been hit or miss this week. It's just not a great matchup. I would not start any Steeler wide receivers. Alrighty. But that's all depressing stuff. We'll move on to the more fun stuff. But first, Joe Brown, I believe you have a game to play.
I have a game for you to play, David. Far too often in this show, we talk about offensive players because they make up almost your entire fantasy roster. And we say things like matchup and injury and defense. What does that even mean, David? Well, I'm here to talk about defensive players. In fantasy football, we too often group half of the entire game into one tiny slot on your roster, but no more. These teams are made up of fantastic players that are feared by other players in the NFL, and I'm here to test your knowledge of the best defensive players in the NFL today.
Uh-oh.
So,
all right.
I have 5 questions for you.
Shoot, Joe.
There's a total possibility of you getting 10 points. Anyone listening, if you'd like to play along, see if you can beat David, go for it. This is how it's going to work.
You won't.
I went on the NFL top 100 players as voted by their peers. So these are the players that strike fear into the hearts of the other NFL players.
Okay.
And I found the number 1 ranked player in every single defensive position. I have the best D tackle, the best linebacker, the best defensive end, the best cornerback, and the best safety.
Okay.
And for each one, I'm going to ask you if you can name who the top player in that position is. And if you get it wrong, either way, I'm going to tell you the name of the person, and then I'm going to see if you can guess what team they play for. 1 point for each part of the question.
Okay.
And I've also ordered these in the order of how far up the list these players appeared on the overall top 100. So the highest ranked defensive player, starting with the D tackle. Who do you think is the most feared defensive tackle in the entire NFL? Hopefully this is the easiest one, or at least it should be.
I believe his name is Aaron Donald.
It is Aaron Donald. Can you tell me what team Aaron Donald plays for?
I absolutely can. He plays for the LA Rams.
Ding, ding, ding.
2
David
points.
Hansen has acquired his 2
Woo!
points. Aaron Donald voted not only number 1 D tackle, not only number 1 defensive player, but number 1 player in the league last season with 20 and a half sacks. Aaron Donald not only strikes fear into the hearts of his opponents, Aaron Donald is a walking nightmare for quarterbacks everywhere.
He strikes his opponents.
He is terrifying. If you picked up the Rams defense going into this season because they were highly ranked, you did that because Aaron Donald was on their defensive line. So, moving on to another player that hopefully is pretty easy for you. We have the number 1 linebacker in the league. Who do you think is the most feared linebacker in the NFL?
Khalil Mack.
Khalil Mack. Can you
Yep.
tell me what team he plays for?
The Bears.
Boom. 4 points down right there. Khalil Mack, who has 4.5 sacks this season already, was voted 3rd overall in the 2019 NFL Top 100. Jared Goff said in his interview that Khalil Mack exists in his nightmares.
Can you believe the Raiders just traded him away for a first-round draft pick? I mean, a future Hall of Famer. They just traded away to the Chicago Bears.
Players on the Bears said in their Top 100 interview that they are so happy that they got Khalil Mack because now they don't have to play against him anymore.
I mean, if you watch any of the games that he plays in, it's just crazy how quick he gets to the quarterback.
We are talking about a man who is not only a walking tank, but a running tank. This man is so fast, and he can put his left hand on a 300-pound man and just boop, shove him over. The amount of power that Khalil Mack has is unfathomable to normal human beings. He's taking professional athletes and tossing them around like they're your 9-year-old nephew.
Obviously, a big reason why the Chicago Bears are such a highly rated fantasy football defense.
All right, we're gonna move on. Hopefully this next one is also pretty easy.
All right.
We have the defensive end.
The defensive end.
Who is the number 1 most feared defensive end in the National Football League?
Oh, jeez. You know what? I don't know if he plays defensive end, but I'm just going to guess Bradley Chubb.
David, you're about to be very upset with yourself.
Huh.
Because obviously the most feared defensive end in the NFL is J.J. Watt.
Oh my.
Can you tell me what team
Yes.
J.J. Watt plays for?
The Houston Texans.
Oh my. Can you tell me what team J.J.
Whoa, we're getting some. Sorry, my bad. That was the live broadcast broadcasted back to you. Wow, Inception.
I did not enjoy that, but yes, J.J. Watt of the Houston Texans is a manimal of a human being.
Yeah.
So you've got
That's one way of
five.
putting
You've
it.
got 5 points so far. You didn't get the name. You got his team. J.J. Watt. What is happening?
Sorry, I'm looking up. Bradley Chubb is a defensive end. Okay, so I got his position right. I was just wrong that he's not the best.
J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt in 2016 was the number 1 ranked player in the NFL. He was number 12 last year. He has, 4 sacks already this season. He has 96 career sacks.
Wow, that man. And now his brother's in the league too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so many Watts in the league. I think 3 now, maybe, or is the second one still in college? I'll have to look that up.
J.J. Watt is terrifying. The
He
Houston
is.
Texans defense may not be the greatest fantasy defense this year,
No, no, they are not.
but you would not want to face J.J. Watt in the streets if he was mad at you.
I wouldn't want to face him on the field. I wouldn't want to face him
anywhere. All right. Next, we're going to have one that I think will be a little bit trickier. But who do you think is the number 1 ranked cornerback in the entire league?
Jalen Ramsey.
That was a very quick response. You seem very confident about that.
I'm very confident.
Very confident? That is not correct.
No way.
The number 1 ranked cornerback by his peers was Stephen Gilmore. Can you tell me what team Stephen Gilmore plays for?
New England Patriots?
The New England Patriots.
Okay.
Stephen Gilmore was described by his opponents as being the most disruptive secondary player in the league. He has 19 career interceptions and 365 career yards, and he was voted 22nd overall in the 2019 NFL Top 100.
And obviously a big reason why you don't want to play your wide receivers when they face the New England Patriots, because he's just so good at stopping them from scoring fantasy football points.
It is ridiculous.
It
And
is
now
crazy.
we're on to the last player. I'm not sure if you'll get this one or not. The safety. Who is the number 1 safety in the NFL?
I think Xavier Rhodes plays cornerback, so I'm not going to say him. Let's go with Eric Weedle.
Eric Weedle. It is not.
Or Weddle, I
The
guess.
correct answer is Eddie Jackson. Can you tell me what team Eddie Jackson plays
From the
for?
Chicago Bears?
From the Chicago Bears.
Eddie Jackson.
Eddie
Wow.
Jackson, in only 3 years in the league, already has 8 interceptions and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, well, he's good at finding the end zone. I'll give him that.
Eddie Jackson was voted 30th overall in the NFL Top 100, and his peers are terrified of him.
Yeah.
Eddie Jackson is a pick machine, and when he's not catching picks, he is disrupting passes. He is the reason why you don't want to play your players when they're against the Chicago Bears. When you've got Khalil Mack and Eddie Jackson on the same defense, wide receivers and quarterbacks alike are going to have a rough time.
You aren't running the ball. You ain't throwing the ball. The Bears.
That was just a little reminder about the defensive players and what they contribute to the game.
Now, if only the Bears had a good offense. Oh, Packers fan. All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. How many points did I get? I got 7.
Overall, you got all of the team names, but you got 3 of the player names wrong. So you would have ended with 7 points.
7 points. If you got better than 7 points, send me a message or Joe a message, and we will shout you out on the next show.
Make
but
sure
I don't
the message includes a stab at the Packers.
If you do that, you will not make it on. You will be publicly humiliated on the show.
I will make sure you end up on the show if you stab the Packers.
But my guess is I don't think that many people beat me. So ha. All right. Moving on. Joe, we will talk more about defenses later in the show. I have a little game for you. But first, we're going to talk about a player that is near and dear to your heart that just absolutely screwed the pooch this week. Oh, no. Mike Evans, Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver. Joe, can you tell me how many points he got?
0.
Can you tell me how many receptions he got?
0.
Joe, that is as many as you got this week.
That's hilarious, David. And did you know that you've killed as many people this year as Hitler has?
Wow. I would just like to remind you that the views expressed by the individuals on Pizza FM are
I
not
don't live in Unit 1.
I'm kidding. I'm not kidding about the disclaimer. But Mike Evans, unfortunately, has had a rocky start, and this game makes fantasy managers even more nervous about Mike Evans, especially when Chris Godwin had a great game. Is Chris Godwin becoming the number one wide receiver, an option for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Possibly. But here's what I'll say about it. And Joe, you can chime in a second. But Mike Evans, let me read you out his total yardage the past couple of seasons he's played. 2018, 1,524 yards. 2017, 1,001 yards. 2016, 1,321 yards. 2015, 1,206 yards. 2014, 1,051 yards. There's a pattern there, and that they're all over 1,000 yards. Mike Evans consistently catches over 1,000 yards of passing. This season, he is currently at 368 through 5 weeks of the season. Now let's take out week five where he had 0. Take out that outlier. And let's take out the outlier where he had 190 yards of receiving in week 3. That gets you 178 over 3 games. Doing the math for that over 16 games is just under 1,000 at 949.333 yards. I have to believe that this pattern of 1,000 yards per season continues this season. He's had a couple of fluke games. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have just been trying to figure out their offense with their new coach, with the new Bruce Arian offense, as it's called, because Bruce Arian runs the offense. I do think Mike Evans is going to be a wide receiver 1 this season. Godwin may outscore him this season. He's certainly on pace to right now, but I think both of them can be wide receiver 1s, especially considering Tampa Bay is going to need to throw a lot. And if Winston has his groove going, that's great news for the Buccaneers. Joe, any thoughts?
I was just going to ask you how much you thought Pirates pay for those earrings that they have.
I have a feeling they probably steal the earrings. After all, they are pirates.
No, they're a Buccaneer. They're a buck. They're a Buccaneer. They're a buck in ear.
Yeah,
they're a buck. I get that Pirates are. Thank you.
Okay, so for those of you who can't look, Joe is currently standing up. He's currently taking a victory lap after that amazing pun. Joe is shaking the hands of all the fans of our live studio audience. You can hear them applauding right now. Yeah. Okay, guys, we gotta. Okay, thank you.
No, guys,
Joe,
I gotta get back to the show.
Joe, it appears that
when's your Netflix special coming out, Joe? I gotta get back to the show, guys. I gotta get back to that. Thank you.
What a wild audience we have
it's a Buccaneer,
today.
David.
But, yeah. Oh, I get it, because the football team are called the Buccaneers. Okay, sorry, I thought it was just a little fun cost game. All right, so I killed the joke. We're gonna wrap up this part by just saying, if you can buy low on Mike Evans, do so. Otherwise, if you have Mike Evans, keep him. He's gonna be good this year. I've done a lot of soft talking this episode. It's kind of a new thing we're trying. All right. Hey, talking about Buccaneers that underperformed, how about O.J. Howard, who makes that category for the 5th week in a row, possibly?
Is it really underperforming at this point?
No, it's just sucking. O.J. Howard, 2 fantasy points in a game where they had a lot of passing yards passed around. Listen, if you're an O.J. Howard owner, I vouched for him these past couple of weeks. O.J. Howard, if you are listening to this podcast, this radio show, which I'm assuming you are, because we are, I don't want to brag, but we're pretty popular. O.J. Howard
believed in you, O.J.
I said, keep him on your team. Things will start to pick up, and there's not that many options for tight end. Well, you know what, O.J. Howard? I'm now authorizing everyone who's listening to this podcast to drop O.J. Howard. There is no point in keeping 2 tight ends in your team if one of them is just going to shuck every week. In most cases, it's not worth it to keep 2 tight ends. O.J. Howard is droppable. He is untrustworthy. Until we see consistent production from him, I would keep him on the waiver wires. I know there aren't a lot of options at tight end to pick up. Maybe you grab the Rams tight end. You could grab Henderson, I believe is his name, the last name, from the Jets. He's back from his suspension, though he's going to miss this game with an injury. I'm boggled by how poorly O.J. Howard has been playing, especially as a guy who was drafted by some people as the 4th or 5th tight end overall, depending on how they felt about Evan Ingram. I just can't believe it. In an offense that is finally starting to flourish, O.J. Howard remains stagnant at a solid suck points. That made no sense, but you get what I mean.
Congratulations, O.J. Howard. You have broken the heart of this Illinois cornfield boy.
I'm so sad.
He is a sad husk of a man.
Want to know who repaired my heart this week, though?
Who was it?
A man I've believed in ever since the draft, and that is the running back for the New England Patriots, Sony Michel. Sony Michel finally had a breakout game. 21.3 fantasy points. He had 16 carries for 91 yards, the most amount of scrimmage yards he's got, or most amount of rushing yards he's gotten this season. 1 touchdown, and something we're not used to seeing out of Sony Michel, 3 catches, which is 3 more than you expect out of Sony Michel in a game. They usually throw to James White. 3 catches for 32 yards. So, is this promising for Sony Michel? Is this just a fluke? Hard to say, especially with a Patriots offense that is still developing and with so many running backs. Joe, if you're a Sony Michel owner right now, how are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good, but you're currently asking a James White owner.
Oh, my bad.
So
if you're a James White owner,
he needs to stop catching the ball. Is what Sony Michel needs to do.
Yeah, stay in your lane, Sony Michel.
Stay in your lane.
Oh, sorry for those of you who are wearing earbuds like I am. Or not earbuds, headphones, whatever. Anyways, so Sony Michel, listen, he's going to be up and down. We know that about Sony Michel. Hopefully, what is really promising to me is that despite his ineffective games in the past, the Patriots and Bill Belichick keep giving him the handoffs. They really trust Sony Michel, and that makes me think you should trust Sony Michel too. This week he has a great matchup against the Giants. I would put him in your flex spot if you're feeling like Sony Michel could do you some good. I think he could this week. He will be up and down going forward, but I mean, it's very promising that he's finally getting it together. I don't think this is a fluke. I think this is more real than fake, and I'm excited about the future of Sony Michel. Let's talk about some more games this previous weekend. How about the Jaguars versus the Panthers? The game where Christian McCaffrey, as you said, carried the team on his back. The Panthers ended up winning this game, but it was much more high scoring than most people would have thought. When you think Jaguars, you usually think good defense, not so great offense. This week, it was kind of the opposite. The defense let a lot go with the Panthers, especially weren't able to stop Christian McCaffrey. But Gardner Minshew is proving that he is legit. And I will say this about the Jaguars offense. Gardner Minshew, starting quarterback, legit. 21.2 fantasy points. I don't know if he is your QB1, but I would not mind playing him week to week. I think matchup dependent, but you can throw him in there, and you can trust that he'll get you good points. We were talking about last week that he's been steady. Even though he's been slightly under 20, he's been consistently right in the 17, 18 range. Now having a game over 20 points, I mean, especially with some quarterbacks with tough matchups coming up. We'll talk about Carson Wentz a little bit later, and with some quarterbacks very much underperforming, Baker Mayfield, who we'll also talk about later. It's just, I think he's a good fill-in, and I'm excited about the future of Gardner Minshew. Leonard Fournette, running back that people weren't sure about this year, going into this year, he is also legit. Another great game from Leonard Fournette. I think he is now a set it and forget it running back. You can play him every week after getting 23.7 points this week, and he might be shaping up to be the running back 1 that we hoped he would be 2 seasons ago. All right, and finally, DJ Chark. Joe's friend/enemy. I don't know how else to put it. You have him in one league, you don't have him in another. Listen, DJ Chark came out, got 36.4 fantasy points. Does DJ Chark keep putting up these high numbers? Every week we say, no, it'll go down eventually. It's yet to, but it will. It will. He can't be getting 36 points every game. But he is also a legit wide receiver. I would say he's a wide receiver 2, bordering on a wide receiver 1. I think he is also a set it and forget it guy. He has just been an incredibly athletic, talented player that this Jaguars offense has needed desperately. They've needed a star wide receiver. And while D.D. Westbrook has been okay, and we thought he'd be good going into the season, DJ Chark has been impressing the Jaguars coaching staff since summer camp, and he continues to impress them on the field week to week. I like DJ Chark going forward. On the other side of the ball, there's not too much to say. Christian McCaffrey's amazing. We already knew that. But here's something interesting. With Christian McCaffrey having this slight injury, I think the Panthers reshaped their offense a little bit. I think they need to throw it some more, especially against Tampa Bay. So that's why I'm saying a guy who has silently been very consistent point-wise is someone who you need to buy low on right now, because I think he'll be getting more receptions in the future, and I think he'll bump up from already like a decent flex wide receiver 3 play to a high-end wide receiver 2 play. That's my prediction, and that's what I predict for DJ Moore, another DJ in this game. Just like Joe and I are 2 DJs here on Pizza FM. Wicka, 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 wah. We had 2 DJs play very well. Listen, DJ Moore, his 5 weeks, 12.6 fantasy points, 17.9, 13.4, 7.4, and most recently, 15.1. The 7.4 was all right, but the rest of the games have been pretty good. And what's very promising is that his highest point total so far, the 17.9, came against the Buccaneers, who they play this week. So I'm very excited. I think they can't keep relying on Christian McCaffrey to do everything for them. They're going to break the poor guy down. They need to throw the ball. And I think DJ Moore is the most likely candidate to receive more targets because of it. All right, let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons versus the Houston Texans. A very high-scoring game with poor defense. This was a real shootout. And we finally saw some players play very well that haven't been impressing so far, like Devontae Freeman. I was wrong about that. I was worried about Devontae Freeman. Playing well now, 18 points. Will he continue to play well? I hope so. The Falcons need to shape up. I mean, they are now 1-4, I believe. So they're going to be trying everything and anything. And with a guy you can depend on, that being Devontae Freeman, who's been in the league a little bit, I think he continues to play well. Calvin Ridley had a great game, 19.8 fantasy points. Also worth a note that Mohamed Sanu also had a great game.
About 14 points or so?
Yeah. Another great game, maybe a waiver wire candidate if you're still looking for people. There's one player that did not have a great game, fantasy football game, and that is Julio Jones. In a game that was a shootout, he got shut out almost. 7.2 fantasy points. And this came right after a week of having 9.3 fantasy points. These aren't bad numbers for a flex, a wide receiver 3. But you drafted Julio Jones maybe as the number 1 wide receiver overall, more likely number 3, number 4 wide receiver overall. But you drafted him as your RB1, or RB, WR, wide receiver 1. And he has not performed too well. He's had, or at least in these past 2 games, 0 touchdowns in these past 2 games, when in the first 3 games of the season, he had 4 touchdowns. So what do you do with Julio Jones? Do you sell Julio Jones? No. It's Julio Jones. Listen, he'll have some bad games. The problem with Julio Jones is that everyone knows how good Julio Jones is. But now that Matt Ryan has been throwing very well, I can't see Julio Jones getting shut out of this offense too much longer. He is too good of a player to be stopped for too long. So hold on to Julio Jones. Another player to hold on to, DeAndre Hopkins, 15.8 fantasy points. Not a horrible day, but after one of the other wide receivers got over 50 fantasy points, you would hope for more than 15. But like I said earlier, they needed big plays that game against the Falcons, and Will Fuller was the big play guy. DeAndre Hopkins is still going to be a wide receiver 1 for the rest of the season. Don't panic on him. Some people aren't panicking about is Carson Wentz and Le'Veon Bell. Both played in the Eagles versus Jets game. Le'Veon Bell, I mean, what else are the Jets going to do? Like, they have to give the ball to Le'Veon Bell. Like, their quarterback has been out with mono. Their wide receiver core is meh. I mean, what else can you do? Maybe sell on Le'Veon Bell just because the Jets offense, if they're not going to be able to keep a drive, Le'Veon Bell won't be able to get fantasy points, but I think you're stuck there. Carson Wentz has some tough matchups coming up, and he did not have a great fantasy game this week. But I attribute that to the Eagles being up very early thanks to some defensive touchdowns, and he just didn't need to throw. Now he'll have some tough games coming up, so maybe you look for a filler in, but I wouldn't. I still believe in Carson Wentz. He has a great end of season, especially for the fantasy playoffs. He has a great schedule, and he's shown that he is an all-star quarterback, even in tough matchups. Finally, let's talk about the Packers. Despite the beautiful win against the Cowboys.
I feel a butt coming.
So many butts. Like Aaron Jones' butt getting in the end zone, I believe, 4 times. There was a big butt, unfortunately, and not the good kind of butt. Aaron Rodgers only had 9.4 fantasy points. And all the receivers for the Packers had under that. Had under 9.4 fantasy points.
It's because Aaron Jones was just too good.
Right. I think that's a problem. The Packers.
Not for me.
Not for you. Not for Aaron Jones owners. But the Packers are 4-1 right now. Their formula of running a lot is working. So why put Aaron Rodgers in risk when you don't need to? I mean, this run game, this run-heavy game, and their strong defense that they've been playing has been winning them games. If you're an Aaron Rodgers owner, I probably wouldn't start him this week. That's tough to say as a Packers lover, but it's just the Detroit Lions are a good defense. They have not been throwing the ball super well, and their top receiver, Devontae Adams, might not be 100% healthy. I'm worried about Aaron Rodgers, and I'm worried about the Packers' passing game. I'm not too worried about Devontae Adams. He'll always get receptions. He's the most trusted guy in the Green Bay Packers. But if you're not Aaron Jones, you got to be worried if you have one of those Packer players. One last thing to talk about. Joe, last week we got excited. We threw a little bit of a preemptive celebration because the Cleveland Browns played amazing offensively. And then Monday happened, and they scored 3 points in that football game where they lost to the undefeated 49ers. Guys, the Browns' offense sucks. It's ugly. It is not what we hoped it would be. And if you have a Browns player whose name isn't Nick Chubb, you're worried. Odell Beckham Jr., I'm worried. Not worried in the sense that he won't score well. I'm worried that he won't live up to what you drafted him as. I think if the draft would happen today, there would be 4 or 5 receivers that would be drafted before him, like Chris Godwin. DJ Chark might get drafted. Well, would you draft DJ Chark? He might. I have to think about it for a hot second, but there are a couple of receivers at this point that I would likely draft over Odell Beckham Jr. if we were redoing the draft today. I would definitely, Amari Cooper would be one of those. It's a sad sight to see. He only had 5 points this game. Jarvis Landry, a little more hopeful, had 11.5, but it's still not a good look if the offense isn't doing well. Which brings me back to Baker Mayfield. An atrocious game from Baker Mayfield. Just horrible, horrible game. Wasn't throwing on target. I believe, he was the pass rush was just getting him too quickly. If you know a little bit about the history, there's Nick Bosa, who plays on the 49ers. He played for the Ohio State Buckeyes when they played the Oklahoma Sooners in college, the team Baker played for and won the Heisman for. And when the Sooners beat the Buckeyes, there was that game in Columbus, Ohio, where he took his flag, his Oklahoma flag, planted it right in the center after the win, at the center of the Ohio State football field. And the Buckeyes weren't too happy about that. So if you watch the game, you could have saw a point after Nick Bosa got a sack against that quarterback where he mimicked that celebration. He waved his hands in the air and planted a fake flag in the ground. So yeah, he was still a little salty about that. So he was getting to Baker Mayfield. He had an amazing day. Nick Bosa did.
Talking about psychological warfare here.
Yeah, no kidding. So Baker Mayfield, after a week where he threw 2 interceptions, had 1 fumble, and -2 fantasy points, he's droppable.
Drop him.
I can't see how you could consider rostering him now. only 100 yards of passing. He's up against Seattle, which is a good matchup, but I don't care. He had -2 fantasy points.
There are better quarterbacks you could pick up on the waiver wire. Jacoby Brissett's probably still on the waiver wire. Gardner Minshew's probably a better choice than Baker Mayfield at this point.
Yeah. All right. But enough about the depressing stuff. That's our fantasy advice for these upcoming days. There's a little more we could talk about. Unfortunately, we only have so much time. And as it is now 7 o'clock, we're going to have to wrap it up soon. So, Joe, I have a little game for you.
All right.
And it also, coincidentally, we did not plan this beforehand, has to do with defenses.
All right.
Now, Joe, I feel like I study a lot of offensive facts. I know a lot about wide receivers, running backs. You are easily the kicking mastermind. And to prove that, really quickly, I'm going to give you 2 guesses to guess who the number 1 scoring kicker is right now. I'll give you a hint. It's not the Carolina kicker anymore.
All right. Interesting.
I don't think you'll need 2 kicks.
I also
2 guesses.
know that it's not Greg Zerling.
Do you know that? It's Greg Zerling.
It's Greg Zerling?
Greg Zerling is currently the top kicker.
The last time I checked, he was number 2.
Did you check this week?
I thought I did.
He was 2 last week behind the Carolina kicker. However, the Carolina kicker did not have a great game this week. Greg Zerling did. He's now the top kicker. But some more fast facts before we get to the game about top-rated players. The top-rated player overall and the top running back, Christian McCaffrey, 159.6 fantasy points. I believe that's about 30 more than the next highest player, which is Austin Eckler. Joe, can you guess who the number 1 scoring wide receiver is right now? It's someone we've talked about today.
I would imagine it's Godwin, right?
You're right. It is Chris Godwin. Number 1 scoring tight end. I don't know if you'll get this one. This one's kind of weird.
Is it Kelsey?
No, actually. Kelsey's close, but it's Austin Hooper of the Atlanta Falcons.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I should have known that. I was playing someone who had him last week.
And the top quarterback right now, it is not Patty Mahomes.
No, I know it's not Patty Mahomes.
Or Deshaun Watson.
Is it Lamar Jackson still?
No.
Is it Jameis Winston now?
No, not him either.
Interesting.
It's someone who's been quietly very consistent and had some great games from a team that was the run heaviest last year, and that's Russell Wilson, Seattle Seahawks. He's having a great season so far. I don't know if he ends top 1, but I bet he ends top 5. All right. Let's get to the defensive, though. Joe, I have a defense game because while I'm kind of like the guy who knows the wide receivers and running backs, you're the guy who knows the kickers. Defense is completely up in the air. Yeah. One of us has to be the defensive champion. So, Joe...
Well, you got 7 points in my game.
Well, we'll see how many points you can get in this game. Joe, I'm going to ask you a couple random questions about the defenses. I want to see what you can do. Uh-oh.
That's not great.
That's the knock. Give us 1 second.
Come in. Hi, we're bad at time management.
Sorry about that. We're wrapping up. All right. So really quickly, we'll finish this up. Joe, how many games? The number 1. How many games has the number 1 scoring defense overall, the New England Patriots? How many games have they had where they've scored under double digits?
1.
Correct.
It was 7 points week 2.
Wow. All right. We're going to ask you 2 more questions and then we'll get out of here. All right. Joe, can you name how many teams have had no negative point games? They haven't had a single game where they had negative. How many defenses?
I would have to guess on that one. I'm probably going to say 4.
No, 14.
Holy wow.
Yeah,
really?
A lot of non-negative games. All right, and final game, or final little question for you. How many teams have had over 30 points, 1 week over 30 points of fantasy football?
That one I'm going to say is for a smaller list. I'm going to go with 3.
A little bit higher, 6. But I will give you the defensive mastermind if you can name 3 of the 6.
49ers, Patriots. I don't think the Rams have.
No.
I'm going to throw on the Ravens.
No, but that is one of your guesses.
Yes. How many guesses do I get?
3 more.
3 more. I would go for the Saints.
Okay.
The Raiders and the Bears.
You got 3 of the 6. You are now the new defensive mastermind. Patriots, 49ers, Bears, Titans, Eagles, and the Giants. All right, that's it for us. Thank you guys for tuning in to Touchdown with Hansen and Brown. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Good luck to the Giants, who are going to get thrashed by the Patriots tonight. And some final word of advice. Aaron Jones is the greatest. Aaron Rodgers makes me sad. And go Pack, go.
Firmly in my clothes. He was a lad of foreign origin, but no